He walked over 10 miles to my parents' house after throwing the protective order under a bridge with this duffel bag. Broke into my parents' house while I wasn't there, nor Casey. He hid up in the attic for 3 days until he waited for me to get home. And when I did get home and no one was in the house, he came in with my son with a knife, you know, with on my 6-year-old son with a knife held to his next to his throat, wanting to know where a shotgun was at. And he continued, I just was begging and pleading for him to leave Casey alone. Don't hurt him. He dragged me out of the house with a knife to my throat after he made me get my checkbook and my money and my keys. He threw me in the truck and was driving to the end of the road, which I knew where it was, had my head in his lap, and gets to the stop sign. All I know is I'm not going anywhere with him. He's not killing me outside this neighborhood. If I die, I'll die here.
We are about to watch the 2024 parole hearing of the man who was given a 62-year sentence for what he did to her. Now, he's been locked up since the year 2000 and had previously had a parole hearing back in 2022. We're going to take a blast in the past, watch that parole hearing before we fast forward to the present. Now, what you didn't hear is that he walked 2 miles immediately after getting released from prison for already what he had done to her. So he went straight from prison to hide in her attic for 3 days. This is scary. This is a scary case, but we're going to get to the bottom of this with a Miss Jackson interview. And with that, let's jump in.
This is the matter of Robert S. Hunt, DOC number 318004. He's an offender class. He is a third felony offender. He has a parole eligibility date of August the 1st of 2021, an adjusted good time date of April the 1st of 2037, a full-term date of March 4th of 2063. He is currently serving a 62-year sentence on the charges of 3 counts of simple burglary, second-degree kidnapping, and forgery. Is all that accurate, Mr. Hunt?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hunt, your case was assigned to me, so I'll be the one beginning our interview process. Mr. Hunt, how old are you, sir?
51.
And Mr. Hunt, how long have you been in jail?
Since 2000.
And so, with that, 22 years?
Yes, sir. About 22.
Tell me in your own words why you're in jail. What do you believe the reason you're in jail for?
The direct reason I'm in jail is because of the commission of the crime. The reason
Well, tell me what you did.
Sir?
Tell me what you did.
I hurt someone that loved me. I hurt someone that cared about me.
It's very general. Tell me specifically what it is that you did.
I waited outside behind the house until nobody was in the house. Then I broke into the house. And I went upstairs and secreted myself into the attic for I believe it was probably 2 days. And I was waiting until I was able to come out and see my victim alone. And in my delusional state to have a conversation with her. And when I did come out of the attic, my son was there. I went into the bedroom and I took my victim out of the bedroom and I went outside and got into the truck. And we left the residence.
Let's slow down just a little bit, Mr. Hunt.
Yes, sir.
Before you went into the house and stayed in the attic for 2 days, where had you been previous?
In the woods.
Okay. And when did you get out of prison?
Go right before that. I think 2 days before that.
Rita, what were you in prison for that time?
I was arrested for second-degree assault, false imprisonment, sir. False
Keep going.
imprisonment, false imprisonment, and rape.
Correct.
Rape.
Same victim.
Sir?
Same victim.
Yes, sir.
So you had just gotten out of prison for all of these horrible crimes against the victim whose house you break into and you hide in the attic for 2 days. And all you wanted to do was talk to her? Now, what was going on with you?
That's just it. I have no idea what was going on with me. I was lost. It was dark in my mind. I was confused. I was selfish.
How long did you stay in prison on those charges before you got out?
92 days.
Were you on drugs or alcohol?
Sadly, no. If I say it because like that, because I mean, if I would have been on drugs or alcohol, there may have been some excuse for it. There may have been some understanding.
Mr. Hunt, you are suggesting to me and to this board that you waited in an attic for 2 days so you could talk to her, and then you took a ride with her. You physically abused her and dragged her to that car, didn't you? No, come on. Tell the truth about what you did.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I waited
Well,
in.
You have a long history of abusing this lady, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Why is that?
Because I confused what I thought was love with my selfish intent, with my inability to be compassionate, my inability to feel any type of compassion towards any other individual other than myself.
So that caused you to beat this lady unmercifully on a number of occasions? I'm really having trouble understanding why you did what you did. You're asking me to let you out. You've been in prison a number of times, a number of arrests involving horrible crimes against this lady. And you're asking me to let you out. You're downplaying what you did back then. So I'm trying to figure out what caused you to do all of these things. You've been in prison for 22 years. I'm sure you've given that some thought. What caused you to do these things?
Because I was selfish. I was unmeritoriously arrogant. Because I had no idea how a society or a system or my civic or social responsibilities were. Because I was still an adolescent in my mind.
How old were
I'd never grown up.
How old were you when you went to prison 22 years ago?
29 years old.
What kind of education did you
have? Unbelievably, I have college level education.
So tell me what circumstances you believe caused you to, and I'm still not sure what your excuse is, but tell me what led you to that emotional state.
Now, I don't know about you, but I receive dozens of spam calls per day. So many that I had to set my phone to only allow calls from known numbers. You know, basically, if the contact isn't saved in my phone, I won't get the call. So this, of course, created so many problems. I actually didn't have my mother-in-law saved in my phone, so that's a story that we can get into at another time, but not good. And of course, it created issues with business calls. So, you know, I was kind of just stuck between a rock and a hard place. I get so many calls nonstop. I mean, the vast majority of the phone calls that I receive are spam calls. It drives me nuts. But then that's what I found Aura, the sponsor of today's video. And I am proud to say that Aura is sponsoring Mandu. So I wanted to understand how my personal information was ending up in the hands of these spammers, and more importantly, how I would put a stop to it. With Aura, I receive alerts whenever my personal data is being sold on the dark web or by data brokers. Not only that, but Aura automatically removes my information from these data broker websites and helps me take action if it's exposed on the dark web. Now, this is especially crucial right now, given the recent AT&T data breach, where over 73 million customers were released on the dark web. AT&T recommends using strong passwords, monitoring account activity, and considering credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Well, guess what? Aura does all of that for me. And the best part is, I don't have to juggle multiple apps just because a company failed to keep my data secure. Aura is always looking in the background, ensuring my safety online so I can focus on what matters most without constantly worrying about my personal information falling into the wrong hands. I value my privacy, as you all know. I'm probably one of the more private YouTubers out there, and I value yours too. You can go to aura.com. I have my link below in the description to start your 2 free-week trial. And as I think you know, the idea that we have such a renowned, prestigious, incredible company backing Mandu, backing our channel, backing this is, I think, just a massive breakthrough. And if we can show support to them, that would be huge. Now, I didn't just do this ad. I actually signed up for a full month with their service to see if it really works before I would recommend it to all of you. And it does. I am getting a fraction of the spam calls. I got 2 today when I usually get 15, 16. So it's already made a massive difference. And if you want to help support the channel, you can use the link below. If you want to help support Aura, you can use the link below. You want to stop those spam calls and sleep a little bit better at night, you can use the link below. And with that, we'll go back into the hearing.
I don't have an excuse. I have no excuse at all.
Well, I'm trying to understand why. I mean, you've got no excuse and you can't explain it to me. I'm certainly not willing to let you out.
It's not that I can't.
Because first off, we've got to understand why you did what you did to make sure that you've changed.
Did it because I was lost. I did it because I had no hope. I did it because I had only selfish ambitions to fulfill.
So that caused you to go beat this lady numerous times, rape her, kidnap her? I'm not sure that I follow it.
Caused me to have misplaced anger. It caused me not to be able to hold myself accountable. It caused me to hold society and her being a part of society accountable. And all that has to do with the selfishness. All that has to do with the arrogance that I had built up. The hatred that I had inside of me that I wasn't aware of. The inability to care or be compassionate or love anyone. All of this has been instilled in me, and I was a part of this. I became a part of what I grew up in.
What did you grow up? Tell me about the way you grew up.
I was in jail at 11 years old. I was in the juvenile system. I was determined to be unmanageable by my mother. I was determined to be unnecessary in the house. And I know looking back now that it started to shape me and it started to mold me. And I was rejected by the only person that I had that I could depend on. And so I allowed that to consume me. I allowed that to become my position. I allowed to shape my ideals and my morals. And I allowed it. It was prevalent throughout the rest of my life, and I struggled with it. But I wasn't a person who could ask for help. I wasn't a person who could seek help. I wasn't a person who could accept help, even if I would have sought it. Because I believe
today. Tell me what it is or why you think I should let Robert Hunt out because of the horrible crimes that you committed. Tell me what it is that you've changed. I mean, here, you know, I'm going to tell you, Mr. Hunt, I came in with not very positive feelings. And then you start minimizing what you did to begin with. So tell me very honestly why you believe I should vote to let you out, realizing what you've done in the past, what you did to this lady, all of the scars that she still has today. So tell me why I should vote to release you.
If the board would indulge me, I've considered that question numerous times over the past 20 years, and especially lately. And I can't truly come up with any satisfactory answer, and it would seem presumptuous to me to imagine that I could give you a reason why I should be let out, considering my history and considering the record that I have. Because I have not there is no way that I could possibly recompense what I have done, not only to her, but what I've done to my child. I abandoned my child. I don't know what I did to him, but I mean, I caused the sheriff's office to be involved. I'm a man who has been relegated to the underbelly of society by my own decisions, by my own inability to express or articulate what was wrong or even understand what was wrong with me. So I am here, deservedly so. I'm under no illusion as to what is going on. I'm before you seeking mercy, and that is it.
Well, you know, one of the problems I have, Mr. Hunt, and I'll be very honest with you, I feel mercy often, but I have to have a reason to feel mercy. I owe an obligation as a member of this board to protect society. My responsibility is not necessarily to determine who you were 22 years ago, but determine who you are today, and are you a danger going forward? That's what I'm asking you. Tell me why I should feel comfortable saying Robert Hunt can go on out to the outside. And what's to tell me that 2 months from now, this lady isn't going to be beat up unmercifully again? That's what I'm asking you. You're telling me I don't understand. I didn't know anything about that. You're right. I don't have any comprehension of it. If you have no comprehension of what you did or why you did it, then I'm certainly not comfortable voting to let you out. So you've had number of classes. You've had all kinds of courses while you've been in the program, in prison. So tell me how you changed and why I should take a chance on you and you won't do these things again. That's why we're here.
My descent into the pit that I ended up in didn't end when I was arrested or incarcerated for this charge. I descended further into that pit, the one that I found myself in. My record is a testimony as to, I guess, the evolution or the de-evolution of the devolvement of myself. I became an addict around 2013, 2014. When I finally stopped, I finally realized the society that I had immersed myself in, the criminal element. And I started looking around and I realized the people, once I reached the penitentiary, I saw the people that I considered to be my associates. And I was not happy where I'd ended up at. And I sought help. I took AA classes. I was a member, and then I became a facilitator. But it wasn't enough to help me.
Let me slow you down just a second. I think you told me earlier you weren't on any kind of drugs when this happened.
I wasn't. I've never done drugs outside of prison, maybe once or twice. I've never had a drug. I've never been involved with drugs.
So when did you become a drug addict?
When I realized what I had become. When I realized.
You're telling me that after you committed this crime, after you committed all of these horrible things towards this woman, you went to prison, you became a drug addict. And then while you're in prison, you've got some help for your drug addiction. That still doesn't tell me why you're not going to go back out and beat this lady up.
I received all of the tools that were available, that were necessary for my recovery from addiction, but they still didn't help. Because my heart was still hard, because I was still a calloused individual, because I was still incapable of compassion, because I still had no sympathy or empathetic position. When I accepted my 60-year sentence in court, I apologized to the victim. I apologized to every victim in the court, and I meant it sincerely. But I meant it from my mind, because my mind still wasn't able to connect with my heart, because I still didn't understand who I was. I still just considered it something that had happened and it had just gone wrong. I still blamed society. I still blamed everybody except the person who was ultimately responsible, and that was me. And then once I came to reach the bottom of the well that I was in, and I started seeking the help, I obtained all of these tools. But these tools were unable to fix me. These tools were unable to correct me. I believed that I was lost. I believed this is how I was made and this is how it would be. And I would do the 60-year sentence. I was a man who had a shed full of tools and they had no appeal to me. I knew that they had some type of power to help me, and I'd seen what they'd done for other people, but they just weren't able to reach me. And then a man that I met when I went to the penitentiary came back into my life, and he'd been praying for me for 15 years. And I stood on that yard, and I accepted God as my Savior, and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. And I just had everything in my mind just changed. My life transformed.
And when was this transformation?
I would say probably a year and a half ago. The record is indicative of it. That is what happened.
So tell me
My
what
desire.
happened. I mean, you've given me a lot of very general things. I haven't heard one word about why I should be comfortable voting to let you out.
The dilemma I'm reaching right now it's actually my desire, because my life is transformed. I have no desire to create victims anymore. I now know that I was wrong.
You're speaking in very general terms. I've yet to hear you apologize to the lady that you beat up. You talked about your son, you talked about this, you talked about that, but I've yet to hear you say anything about her.
And therein lies the dilemma that I'm experiencing right now, sitting in front of you. I sit before you with a burning desire to be released, but not just to be released from prison, to be able to go out there and to attempt to recompense society. My victim, my direct victim, which is her and my child, are ones that I can never recompense. And I kept running into step 9 in the 12-step program, and I couldn't figure out a way to recompense it. And this was one of the factors that caused me to delve so deeply into drugs, because the addiction to the drugs was not my problem. The drugs were the camouflage. The problem was me. The problem was my position. The problem was my false beliefs. The problem was the lies that I had believed.
And a year and a half. Well, let me stop you, because I'm not sure I'm following where you're going. But from what I understand from what you're telling me, a year and a half ago, some gentleman came back into your life. You found God, and that's when you had this transformation. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's when the transformation began. Yes, sir.
So you've been in prison for 22 years, and it's taken 19 and a half years or 20 and a half years to have a transformation. And you're moving in that direction. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's taken 50 years of a society that has convened a panel such as yourself that has allowed me the opportunity to sit before you and ask you for mercy. But I wondered what I would do if my victim was sitting here before you today. And I sit here now telling you with a burning desire, with a sister and a family that would love for me to come home. But 22 years ago, I took her opportunity and her right away from her. And if she opposes my release, then I agree with her, because I would like to give her the voice that I took from her 22 years ago.
Mr. Hunt, let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a mental health evaluation?
I've had plenty of them.
And
I've
have
never
you
been-
have you been diagnosed with any particular disorder?
I've never been found incompetent, sir. And what I'm proposing
I didn't
to-
ask you if you were incompetent or not. I asked you if you've been found with any sort of mental health disorder.
No, sir.
A lot of people are competent, but they have mental health issues.
I have none.
Have you ever taken medication for anything?
Ritalin
And when was that?
when I was a child.
Tell me about your intoxication write-ups in the last 4 years. You've had 5 intoxication write-ups in the last 4 years. Why is that? 3 in the last.
It allowed me to camouflage the problem because I saw no source to deal with the problem. And I believed that I was who I was going to ever be. I believed that there was no redemption for me. I believed there was no possibility for me to change. I knew what I had done to my victim. I knew what I had done, not only her, I knew what I had done to the state. I knew I had become a person who could not provide for himself, a person who has depended upon the state still for his clothing, for his food, for his basic necessities. I felt inadequate, and I still feel inadequate every time I accept a tray in the chow hall because I cannot provide for myself. I can do wonderful things in here, and I pursue these daily. I tell people about the transformation that's occurred in my life. I begin classes. I do self-help classes. I do mentoring classes. I'm a blessing to everybody that I meet now, but that doesn't help my victims. I can't directly ever recompense my victims.
Have you taken any victim awareness programs or any programs that can give you some insight on what your victims are undergoing now, even now, after all of your years of abuse?
Because of my abuse, they're forced to sit here today and relive that moment. I sit here knowing that. I know that they're forced to take time out of their life, out of their schedule, and to entertain me once again. But I have no joy in it. I have no fulfillment in it.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. What can you tell us about Mr. Hunt?
Can't say a whole lot. He just came to DCI in March, so he hasn't been here too long. Most of his career spent somewhere else. I tell you, he does work in our HSUS, as our Animal Shelter Humane Society program. He works over there. That's a good job, but really don't have a lot left to. Don't know a whole lot more about it.
Thank you, Warden. Mr. Freeman, Preston?
Warden, does it show what the 30W write-up was for on 10/1/20?
I'm looking at the write-up. Thank you. Let's see. What's the date of that, Mr. Freeman?
10/21/20. Happened on 9/29/20.
Let's see. Got a aggravated disobedience on that date and the 30W. Above date and time, placing offender Robert Hunt in ASEG pending investigation for making knives in the hobby shop. So he was placed under investigation with that 30W and investigated for making knives. Don't know what the conclusion of that investigation was.
Can you tell me what the conclusion of that was?
I was guilty. I made one.
Thank you for being honest.
Mr. Hunt, I hear you. I do. I hear you. Are you an only child?
I have a sister, the one that's attending the hearing.
Older or younger?
She's 5 years younger than I am.
And you were removed from the home temporarily at age 11?
I was removed permanently.
I don't want to, digress too much, but you were taken out of the home because of what reason?
I was determined to be unmanageable.
What made them believe that you were unmanageable? What was the behaviors that made them think you were unmanageable?
I truly can't tell you. My mother and I have never had the opportunity to have a conversation about that. I was never able.
Kind of things you were doing at age 11 that might have caused her to believe that.
At age 11, I probably scared her to death because I was leaving out of the house at night and going and hanging out in the neighborhood.
Okay, so those are the kind of. And so, when you were taken from the home, where were you placed?
Foster home, state care,
Okay.
different ones.
And do you know why you were never returned to your mom's custody?
Yes, ma'am.
Why?
Because my stepfather didn't want me there.
So, as a child, you felt like you were put out of your home because you weren't learning. Is that correct?
I can only give voice to that now because at the time I didn't have, though I had I possess an above average IQ. I have a high intellect, but I was never able to put everything together. I was never able to combine all the pieces and to understand.
But looking back now, you felt like your family didn't want you and they got rid of you.
I felt like my mother didn't want me.
Were you ever in a foster home with a family for an extended period of time?
I was it's been an extended period of time, being a year or more. Yes, ma'am.
And did you bond with any of those families? Did you feel like you were loved in any of those families?
I feel like the first home that I went into, there was a semblance of it there, but it wasn't. They were not able to give it to me, and I believe it was because of the trauma that I was going through initially. And after that, it was just a series of foster homes, and it was just a check. I mean, just being honest with you now, it was just a check, and it was just a program.
So you aged out of the foster care system?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, that's actually what happened.
Okay, and after you got old enough that you were no longer in foster care, how did you make your way in the world? How did you live? Who did you live with?
Odd jobs and lying to myself.
What do you mean lying to yourself?
I never, ever concluded that I was the source of my problems. I never accepted that I couldn't put it all together. I didn't have the proper tools. I had people that loved me. I had a sister that loved me, but I did not have the ability to put all this together because I did have scars. And I know now that scars have to be attended to and they have to be healed, not just my scars. It's the same reason we're sitting here now. And it's like I told the board, the burning desire I have, and I know that it would disappoint my sister, but I have remorse for my victim. I have remorse not only for my victim, it's like I said, I have remorse for the civic and social position that I abandoned with society. I turned into something that society had to put me into a place with guns and tell me if I walk too far that they have to shoot me. I placed myself into a society where they have to sometimes put me in a cage because I can't function well around the other people that can't be allowed into society either. So
stuff. I mean, I hear you. I've listened to you and I've heard everything you say, and I can understand what you're saying. You know, you have this deep-seated feeling of unworthiness.
No longer.
Right, but for a long time, you said that you have this deep-seated feeling of unworthiness.
I had approximately 35 years.
Person that all of us expect to be there for us, and that's our mother. And so you have this deep-seated sense of rejection and not being loved, and that translated into how you dealt with the world and dealt with people, particularly the victim in this case, because you wanted to feel that love that you couldn't feel, and that turned into control. I understand all of those dynamics.
That's not exactly what I feel though. What it was is she did love me. I hurt someone who loved me.
That you didn't feel worthy.
I hurt someone who loved me because I hated myself,
Then
but I couldn't realize that I hated myself. And so my inward aggression was transferred.
talk too much. You talk too much. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Even though you went through a lot of programs, those programs they reached you intellectually, but not internally the way that they should. The programs you took, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then when you were saved spiritually, that helped you begin to see yourself as worthy.
I saw myself before that, and that was what caused me become an addict, because it allowed me not to have to live with myself.
My question is, how can you live with yourself now? Those problems are still there. You still don't feel like you're worthy. Then what's different?
Because I've been shown that I'm worthy. I've been forgiven.
And that's what I just asked you. Do you now feel like you're worthy?
Now I feel like I need to help other people to understand that they are worthy, that the people that are trapped the way that I was trapped, the people that are in the darkness, as black as the darkness was that I was in, that they're not stuck. That there is.
I understand what you say. I understand completely. And I don't see that that's actually attempting to minimize your actions. And I see that you're in a state of growth. You're finally, a lot of the things, the armor that you had around you, finally falling away, and you're having to deal with those inner heart issues, which are difficult to deal with, that you use drugs to not deal with, but now you're in a position that you're dealing with. And so I'm encouraged to see that work is taking place in you. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Sister. That's all.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from your supporters, your sister, Kelly Hunt.
Hello. I'm not really sure what all to say. The only thing I can really add to anything is that I do believe that he has changed, and he has, from visiting with him and speaking with him and listening to his testimonies, he has, I believe that he has gotten to the point where he wants to spend more time doing for others to replace what he has done. I know that doesn't fix what happened to Sharon nor Casey, but it's the only contribution he feels he can give back to society for what he's done outside of the time, of course. We do have, he does have 3 nephews and 1 niece that are looking at, that are looking to reconnect with him and spend time with him. We have a mother that is a stroke patient, and she cannot visit him. And he's already lost some family while he's been incarcerated, which is common, I'm sure. But he has completed programs in there to try to better himself. I know that's what you were asking, Mr. Marabella. He has completed programs in there. He has gone through a church program in there as well. And the drug and alcohol program that he did go through wasn't 100% for the drug and alcohol. It was also to better himself and to be able to learn how to do things differently, to see things differently, to have empathy for others. And he has gained that. He does have a program, which I'm sure I sent you, I sent the parole board a letter from a facility in my area, that has accepted him for treatment and spiritual treatment, and to try to help him. He would be there for 6 months to help try to get him back on his feet and become a member of society. After that, if he was granted parole, he would transition to my home. And like I said, I do whatever it takes to take care of him and get him, I mean, not enable him, but to be able to help provide what he needs to move forward with his life. He has also gone to schooling when he was over in Angola. So he has HVAC certificates, so he could work in that field whenever he does get out. Other than that, I'm not really sure what else to say, but I would like to see him get released so we could spend time with him again.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Sims, Mr. Andrew Sims.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sims, if you'd introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like us to know about your uncle.
Well, my name's Andrew Sims, and I've been through a lot over the years myself, but as a child, back before he ended up in jail, he actually took care of me more than my father actually has. And I actually miss him a lot. And I mean, I don't really know exactly what to say, but I do miss him, and I actually would love to be able to spend time with him and actually be able to get to know him and be able to actually help him out as much as I can. I mean, I know I'm far away as far as being up in West Monroe, but I would actually literally find a way to make the time and money to be able to go down there to see him. I do miss him a lot because, like I said, he took care of me when my father couldn't. And
Thank you, Mr. Sims. I'm sorry, go ahead.
and I would love to see him be released and be able to spend time with him.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Barrera, who is also a nephew. Mr. Barrera,
Yes, sir.
why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like us to know about your uncle?
I'm Nicholas Pereira, and honestly, like the rest of my family, I would love to see him be released for family bonding and stuff like that. I've not really been able to hang out with him much at all throughout my whole life because he's been in prison, and I would love to have a relational bond with him. Along with that, I would love to support him in any way that I can, whether he's in prison or here. I would also like to see him be able to repent in his own way outside of prison, the best way he sees fit, so that he can grow more and understand better. Other than that, I would really love to see the rest of my family as well as myself to see him home.
Thank you, Mr. Barrera. We appreciate your comments. Now we'll hear from the opposition. Ms. Farshin, do you wish to speak first, or would you prefer the victims to speak first?
Your Honor, I would prefer speaking fast, and I thank each and every one of you for taking the time to listen. This is extremely difficult for the victims in this case. I'm an assistant DA over in the Washita Parish Sheriff's Office, and I have taken a look at this case, and the facts of this case are egregious. Earlier, you posed the question to Mr. Hunt of, what happened, and it really wasn't answered to the fullest degree. And so I'm going to let you know what happened that day. Miss Wells is present. She used to be married to this individual. He has a lengthy criminal history. He's a violent offender, and he's a third-time convicted felon. When he was released for raping and imprisoning Miss Wells, he didn't leave it at that. A few days later, he hides in the attic of her home without them knowing for 3 days. And for 3 days, the parents of Miss Wells are present in that house with no idea that he's hiding there. A 6-year-old child, Casey Wells, is present in that home. And when Miss Wells makes it back to the house, Mr. Hunt had already told law enforcement that he had actually planned on killing the family in that residence. He did not admit that to you today, but there is evidence that that's what he was planning on doing. At some point, he got a knife, and he held that knife to Miss Wells' throat. There is a 6-year-old in the house. Everyone is pleading for him to not kill her. Then he takes it a step farther, and at some point tries to take her away from that house into the vehicle against her will. She manages to break free, and then at some point he grabs her and drags her by the hair to another residence. There are multiple victims in this case. The Holtzclaw family is also a victim, and he breaks into that residence. He does stab one of the Holtzclaw family members, takes them out of their home, and then arms himself with firearms and threatens to kill everyone. This situation, when Miss Wells was injured and bleeding, Mr. Holtzclaw was injured and bleeding. It took the SWAT team several hours before they could convince Mr. Hunt to release Miss Wells so that she could get some medical treatment. They are lucky to be alive here today. They are afraid that if he is released, he will make good on his promise, and they're traumatized by what's happened to them. Mr. Hunt was given a plea deal in this case. It was three 10-year hard labor sentences to run consecutive, and then 30 years for the second-degree kidnapping to also run consecutive. Part of that sentence was one, no habitual offender, and that part of that sentence was for him to serve without the benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. I think he needs to complete that time. The DA's office is in opposition for him to be released. I know that he said that he was an adolescent at the time, but being almost 30 years old is not being an adolescent. I don't believe there is anything mitigating or that can minimize how egregious this case is. So based on that, Miss Wells is present. Mr. Casey Wells, who is now an adult, he is present. And I believe the children of the Holtzclaw family are also present to oppose this. I believe that he should not be released at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Farshon. We appreciate your comments. Mr. Thomas Holtzclaw.
Thank you so much.
Holtzclaw, if you would please introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like us to know.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Marabella. Thank you, board. My name is Tom Holtzclaw. I'm son of Mr. and Ms. James Holtzclaw. Until Ms. Farshon spoke just a moment ago, I didn't hear the Holtzclaw name. And I'm just here to remind the board that there were other victims associated with this crime, other things that were impacted. When it was brought to my attention that there was to be a hearing considering the parole of Mr. Hunt, I was taken aback actually, because I thought that when the decision was made and it was a 62-year sentence, I did not think that we would be here today. Mom and Dad have since passed away, but they were both victims of this crime. They were not, as I believe it, intentional victims. Mr. Hunt did not intend for them to or intentionally go after them, but in fact they were impacted. And I think it's something that as I'm listening to Mr. Hunt and others talk, I think it's a depiction of a total disregard for others, and it's a very large impact on an unselfish nature, that everything is about the person himself. you know, as I looked at, as this was brought to my attention again, I went back and try and refresh myself, because you can imagine you try to forget things, you try to put it out of your mind. But I said I've got to go back and look. Kept all the paper clippings. Mom and Dad did as well. That night after we were allowed to go back into the house, I took photos of the house. All that brought back memories like it hit you in the face. The photos, there was not one room in the house that there was not blood. The smell when you entered the house, it was a mixture of blood, sweat, cigarette smoke, just all kind of things that just hit you in the face. We when dad was stabbed, obviously, after he got out of the house, and Mom did as well, they got Dad to the hospital as soon as they could. When they got there, Dad was, I don't say lucky. I don't believe in luck. I think God was there. God was protecting. But when they got to the hospital, Mom, actually, they started worrying about her more because she was at stroke level. She was about to stroke out. And so as you can imagine, the family, we gathered and we're there to support, as we always did. But they got through that physically. There was things to put back in the house, obviously. And people don't understand in crimes like this, when innocent people are hurt, there's nobody there. There's no fund source that goes, okay, Mr. or Ms. Holtzclaw, here's the funding to restore your house. That's not there. We tried the deep clean and we would still find blood. And Mom and Dad simply could not live there like it was. So we decided we've got to wholesale take everything out, repaint, recarpet, reupholster, redo everything at Mom and Dad's expense. They'd worked up, long, hard lives, doing things the right way in order for this to be hit on them as it was. You get past all that, they moved back in, and it was still an emotional burden that they bore the rest of their lives. Dad was paranoid on if people turned around in the carport or in the driveway. He was paranoid that somebody was out to get him. Dad passed away in 2011. Mom could no longer sleep in her bed. She was afraid for her life. She was afraid that someone would come in and she wouldn't hear them. So she slept in a chair near the door with a phone handy, with a gun handy. And several times we may stop by to pay a surprise visit. We learned quickly that you didn't do that, because if you didn't announce yourself, she might think that somebody else is coming in. She never slept in her bed unless she was visiting one of us again. There was that impact there. She never felt comfortable, totally safe in her home again. Neither did Dad, and that went through until their passing. So not only, and I'm not going to try to upstage what Mr. Hunt did to Sharon or Casey, because that is to me is just unspeakable there. But I will say, I'm here as a reminder that there are other victims, and that I'm here as a reminder that the lack of compassion, the arrogance demonstrated, all of these things, it impacted others. And I want to remind this parole board that there are more victims here. With that, I'd just like to, I know that I've given you a statement, and so you have that in hand. Just to wrap up, I'd just like to read my last paragraph, because that's how I feel. I think it's, if I try to paraphrase it, it's going to be maybe not as well. But so initially, when I considered whether I would support an early parole, I wondered whether Mr. Hunt had been truly reformed. And I'm take away from that real quick to say that I am encouraged that that what I'm hearing is that he has accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. I hope that is the truth, and I hope that he does know, if he has done that, that he is truly forgiven, and I've truly forgiven him as I'm a Christian. As I've taken time to consider, though, that question of whether he should be released or not, I'm reminded of what Mom and Dad taught us. They spent their lives teaching us, their children, and their grandchildren how we should treat others. They taught us through words, through actions. They taught us that when we do something wrong, even if we're remorseful, and even if we had truly repented, there were still consequences for our actions. That's how our family functions. That's how I believe we should function as a society. So whether Mr. Hunt has been reformed or not, and I hope he truly has been, should have no bearing on whether he should be rewarded an early parole. And to that end, I ask the parole board that you honor the decision originally handed down by the justice system, and I ask that you deny the parole for Mr. Hunt today. Thank you.
The host call, thank you, and I apologize for not mentioning your family as victims. I assure you, the entire parole board had all of the reports. We've read everything that Ms. Forshawn talked about. We did not have the insight that you've given us today about your mom and dad. Thank you very much for your comments.
I totally understand. Thank you, sir. Thank you, board.
Ms. Gwen Holtzlaw Rankin. Ms. Rankin, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. I'm not very adept at working with the current technology. Thank you for hearing me today. I am Gwen Holtzlaw Rankin. That was my brother that spoke earlier. We likewise had a sister that has passed away since this time, and I have another brother that is unable to attend at this point. But you can be assured that we were all affected by the actions of this Sunday afternoon. One that was beginning as it normally did with them about to go back to church. They were viewing a football game, which was typical. Dad looked up, and even though it was covered with drapes and there were some shears on the window, he saw someone that was obviously injured, that was bleeding. And he said, "Honey, we've got to help someone else." Because you see, over the years, there had been numerous wrecks on that corner, and they had helped numerous people in their hour of need. That was their heart. As they went to the door and Daddy began to open it, this man with this lady that was clearly injured barged in going, "Get out of my way, get out of my way." A scuffle occurred, as we have been told. Dad was stabbed. He was caught so off guard, he never even knew that he was stabbed at that point, but he was going after them in the house because he wanted to help this lady. My mother grabbed him and pulled him back and took a phone with him and said, "Honey, we got to get out of here." I don't know how much time had passed. I was already at church. I had someone to break in and tell me to hurry, that someone had broken in and harmed my daddy, who was the kindest man you could ever meet, and my mother was there to support him. We arrived and Daddy had gone to the hospital. Mother was on her way. I believe Tom told you about her state. What you don't understand is that in just the short time prior to this, my father had undergone 2 open heart surgeries. It's a wonder that he was here at all, but God had a reason for him being there. They had incurred numerous bills from just that alone. And I believe you heard my brother refer to what was incurred after this. I was there most of the time. I was there helping them. We took them to the hospital. All of this fiasco continued. Later, we had to bring them back because they did not have any of their medicine. They didn't have any clothes. As he spoke a moment ago, I recall opening that door, smelling the blood, the body fluids, the stench, and looking at the carnage that had occurred in what was their home. that they had worked desperately to pay for on very meager salaries. They were safe there. They were comfortable there until this evening, until this act. There was nothing in that house that was not touched. As he told you, we tried to take care of it immediately. It was clear that they could not do it. We had to go a step further. We had to incur more cost. They lived with me at that time. I'd moved my daughters out of their bedrooms. They came in to stay. We talked. We prayed with them. We tried to get the best counseling that we could. The officers returned. They told us these things. The sheriff's department people dealt with us for victims to tell us what we could expect. This was yet another financial burden incurred upon them, along with the physical and the emotional damage that had taken place. After we did get them back in, numerous locks appeared on all the doors. That was not sufficient. Furniture was moved in front of the doors. Lights were added outside at every corner. At one point, there had to be a camera because, as he referred to, they thought they were being stalked by someone pulling in the driveway or someone honking. Phone calls where someone didn't speak immediately or breathed into the phone were a threat. This, Mr. Hunt, is the sentence that you imposed on them, that they had to live for the rest of their life.
Thank you. Let me interrupt you. Please address your comments to the board.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Wrap up, please. We've got.
I apologize, sir. I do. This was a sentence imposed on my parents. Instead of living out their golden years in peace and comfort, they were forced to remember all that had taken place. As we said, my mother was with me for these last few months. She just passed away at the end of February. She was in hospice at that time. And yes, it was heart-related. If she told me once, she told me a million times over the years, do not let him out. Don't let him come back. I'm honoring my parents today in being here and expressing their wishes. I am thankful that you found the Lord because he is your source of strength. He is the one that will provide for you. He is the one that will change your heart. However, sir, as this sentence was imposed on them that they had to endure for the remainder of their life, it is my wish that you serve that sentence that was imposed upon him. Thank you for hearing me. I apologize for my emotions. But this,
Thank you. Ms. Sharon Wells?
Yes, I'm here.
Ms. Wells, if you would please tell us what you'd like us to know.
Well, I was shocked in the very beginning to see that this hearing was coming about. So sorry. And, you know, when you ask him to tell you the story of what happened, I don't see how it could play out so less than what it was. The way he told it, it's so vivid in my mind. As Casey and I came home that day from the lake, and I walked to the bedroom, and Casey was in the living room, and all of a sudden my door flies open, and he's standing over Casey with a knife. I was in shock. I couldn't understand what he was doing in our home. And all I could do was beg to let Casey go, let him come over here by me. And he's asking for a shotgun. Where's the shotgun? And I'm telling him I don't know. And he says, yes, you do. Yes, you do. And he's telling me to get my wallet, telling me to get a checkbook. And I'm asking him, please don't hurt Casey. He says he's not going to, but he grabs me after I get the checkbook, the keys, and the wallet. And he puts a knife to my throat, and by my hair, he starts pushing me out towards the front door, towards the truck. I was so afraid. I kept telling myself, you're not screaming. You're not screaming. And when he threw me in the truck, I threw my wallet out the truck window. It was down. And I began to scream, and he started backing the truck up and had my head down in his lap. And all I could think of is I can't let him take me out of this neighborhood. And as he was going down the road, I knew just about we were getting to a stop sign. And I threw it in the park and grabbed the keys and threw them out the window. And when I did that, I began to fight to get out the door, and he pulled me back in. And then I don't remember being cut. I remember trying to grab the knife away from him by the blade. I was so afraid. He started pushing on my eyes, telling me he was going to push my eyes out if I didn't let go of the knife. I let go. And as he pushed me out of the truck, my dad and another truck had come up behind us. My dad was approaching the vehicle, and he put the knife to my throat, and he says, you come any closer, I'm going to kill him. I told my daddy, please back away. He's going to do it. He kept telling me, where's the keys? Find the keys. I said, I don't know. I threw them. I don't know where they're at. Just see the look in my dad's face that he couldn't help me. It was so hard. He began to push me towards the house, and I knew it was Tommy Hoseclaw's parents because I went to high school with Tommy. When Mr. Hoseclaw opened that door, he wanted to help, and I know he said something to that effect. And I remember Scott pushing him back and swinging the blade, which cut his arm, I believe. He told him to get out of the house or he was going to kill him. I don't remember much other than being pushed towards the back of the house. And I know he was on the phone. He said, if there's anybody in the house, he was going to kill him, tell him to get out. He had some duct tape. He had told me to get out on all fours. He wanted to duct tape me. And I told him no. I kept just staying on my knees, looking for something to protect myself with. And during this time, I believe everyone had exited the house. He was on the phone with the sheriff's department. He had me crawling on all fours, going room to room to make sure everyone was gone. Every room in the house, he'd have me sit on the bed or be on the floor. I didn't realize how badly I was bleeding until he came back to the hallway. I didn't even know there was a gun cabinet there. And he began to load guns. And I looked in the mirror in the bathroom and I saw myself where I'd been cut across the face, which I ended up with 30 stitches across my face and probably 40 across my shoulder and about 7 in my hand. But during the 3-hour standoff, he was wanting to have sex with me, threatening to, kill me, told me he had thought about killing my family. He had thought about killing me. And God protected me, and he protected Mr. and Miss Hoseclaw to get out of that home. He protected Casey. He protected my parents because while he was in the attic, he had even thought about killing them because this is what he told me. But the 3-hour standoff, I didn't think I would make it out alive. And it was only God's grace that I did, and that I'm here today to be able to speak for myself as a survivor and for I've been able to go and be a spokesperson for domestic violence through high schools in 2002, 2003, helped change the law of domestic violence to a felony conviction, like a 3-strike you're out, with Jerry Jones, the district attorney back then. But listening to him today, I forgive him for what he did, but his actions have changed the entire course of my life. I'm afraid for others that are around me if he's released, not just for myself. And I am opposed for him to be released.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. I appreciate your comments, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Hunt, is there anything you'd like to say before the board votes?
Yes, sir. I'd like to take the opportunity to apologize to the host clause and to Sharon and to Casey, because there's nothing that weighs heavier on my heart. And one of the biggest regrets that I have is that she ever met me. It was not my intention that the course of events take place that day, but I definitely set into motion everything that did happen. And I accept full accountability and responsibility for it. And I don't tell you that easily, because it's, as much as I told you I had a burning desire that I want to get out, I also understand all of their positions. And I want to thank them for having the grace to be able to tell me that they forgive me. And it means so much to me. And if that's all that I get out of this hearing, then I understand. And I understand their expectations, and that you have bosses too that you have to report to. And if I've not met those yet, or if I never meet them, the most important thing that I got out of this is that they forgive me. And that means so much to me. And I want to tell them that I understand now. And I'm sorry that they ever had to endure anything like that because of me, because I was a monster, because I was an animal. I was unreasoning. I was unsympathetic. I didn't have the capacity for it. But I believe that, God found me in here. And if this is where I have to stay at, then that's fine, because I'm not changing my position either. If this is where it all ends at, then, one day all I know is that, being that they're believers, then they will meet in heaven and everything. It may never be all right here, but I want them to know that I carry it around and I think about them every day. And I don't think about them in some morbid sense. I think about them that I know I have caused all of these victims. Not only those victims, everyone else that was involved in it, from the police department to the social services. And I appreciate the opportunity to hear the families speak, and because I didn't think about Ms. Holtzclaw having to redo their house and the pain that the children had gone through. And I can appreciate them sharing this with me. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry, I can't take it back. I can never redo what was done, but I am sorry, and I have changed. And I have reached a point where my life has been transformed. And I agree with them. If they're scared to death that I get out, then I took her opportunity to have a voice 22 years ago, so I honor her request now. As badly as my sister and my family doesn't. Because the one thing I've learned is it's not about me. And I am sorry. And if they don't want me out, then it's okay. But I do thank them for forgiving me, for offering me their forgiveness. That means so much to me. Because that was one of the things that I struggled with the most. That I can never make it up to them. And I couldn't even apologize to him.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Board ready to vote? First off, I'd like to say to all of the participants here today, both the supporters of Mr. Hunt Thank you very much for being here, and to the victims. Thank you for the courage of being here and sharing with us your experiences. Mr. Hunt, the crime itself is one factor that we all look at as a board in determining whether or not to grant a parole in this particular case. The crime is horrible. There's no question that the various crimes that you committed on certainly your ex-wife, but the host clause as well. You've indicated and you've talked about your background, and I accept that. It appears that you may be moving in the right direction. Something happened to you a year and a half ago. You indicated that someone came back into your life and it's kind of changed you. And you found Jesus and you found religion, and you're feeling some things that you couldn't feel before. Those are all tremendous things for you. Based upon all of the things that I've seen, your criminal history, the supervision history, your history of violence, the opposition, your disciplinary record, law enforcement opposition. I just can't vote today to grant. My vote today is going to be to deny you, but to encourage you to continue with your faith and continue looking inwardly, and perhaps sometime in the future, the vote might be different. But for me today, my vote is to deny. Ms. Jackson?
Mr. Hunt, I want you to hear me and believe me. You're already free. Whether you serve the balance of the sentence behind bars, you are already free. And I want you to believe that. And I want you to accept the forgiveness offered by the victims in this case. And I hope that it brings you healing, because you're very broken. But through your faith in Christ, you're free. But when I look at the seriousness of the offense, the harm that it's caused, and I compare it to the amount of time that you served on this charge, it's just not enough yet. And it's not to say there won't be a time in the future where it might be different, but today, because of the strong victim opposition and the fact that you had served less than half your sentence, my vote today is to you.
Thank you.
I also want to thank the victims and also your family for having the courage to come speak to us today and let us know what's all going on in your minds. But for the same reasons as my colleagues, I vote to deny.
Mr. Hunt, you've had 3 votes to deny, but encourage you to continue on. I hope that you can find some relief. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to fast forward to August 2024 to watch his next parole hearing, which is quite interesting, right? I thought in his final statements, he said, it's okay. If they don't want me out, it's okay. I mean, I think it was just a clear attempt at trying to be manipulative. I was not impressed by this parole hearing at all. It's like he's articulate. He kind of knows how to talk, but when you actually listen to what he's saying, he's not saying anything. This hearing took place 7/19/2022, and because of Louisiana legislation, he can keep applying every 2 years. Think about how exhausting that is. I mean, he has a good time date of 2037, but the idea that the family is going to have to continue to show up every 2 years. I mean, you heard what he did, right? He for whatever reason, Louisiana, because, I mean, come on, what's the big deal? He sexually assaults her. He does all those things. He gets locked up, gets out 3 months later. But don't worry, that he has a restraining order. Don't worry, the victim's going to be protected because he has a restraining order. We hear from the victim. He throws the restraining order out, walks to her house, hides in her attic for 3 days. And then with his son, 6-year-old son, and he takes the knife, and it's just hard to wrap one's mind around it. And Miss Jackson is, she's zeroed in. She kind of identified, okay, here's someone who at 11 years old was kicked out of his home. He probably has, it's like a certain syndrome, a certain thing, a hatred towards women. It's a hatred towards his mother. It's like the classic profile for a serial killer, for someone who can be someone who needs to be locked up for the rest of their life. But he doesn't even, it's like all this time, he can't admit that still. He said, no, I had a great relationship. I love my mother. I don't have a rage towards her. And it's like denial, or just no insight, or it's hard to. And, first, and really, I think there's just a lot of lies and inconsistent. Oh, I had no drug problems, unfortunately, but then he became one in prison. And then it's like, it's like, I think the definition of gaslighting. There's like a lot being said, and he says it like with a certain like art above average ability to articulate and communicate, but nothing's being said. I don't recognize that ADA. I always wonder how we have an English, in an English accent speaking defense attorney with the parole project. We have an English speaking. I'm curious about that. Like, how is it that you're brought up in a different country, and that you would, is that it seems more challenging to learn a whole new law system. But I love the accent. I think it adds like 50 IQ points. I know it's just me, but I thought you did a great job talking up for the family. And we're going to fast forward to his next parole hearing. And let's just do that, because we've been here for a while, and then I'll unpack with what details I have at the end. We don't have appeals for this. Remember, he took a plea deal of 62-year sentence. But before we do, in his final statements, what did he say? My biggest regret is that she ever met me. That's what he says in his final words. My biggest regret is that she ever met me. What? Oof. Remember, he has a biological son with her. And we're going to hear from him in the next hearing. And it's pretty intense. With that, let's jump in.
Number for the record.
Robert Hunt, 318004.
Mr. Hunt, you're before this panel today as a third felony offender. You're currently serving a 62-year sentence for the crime of simple burglary, second-degree kidnapping, and you were revoked on a forgery charge. You have a parole eligibility date of 8/1/2021. That means you're a rehear and before a panel before. You have an adjusted time of 9/23/2036 and a full term date 3/4/2063. Does that sound correct?
Yes, ma'am.
We have several members in support of you today. Josiah Hayes III, Kelly Hunt, and Susan Antley. They all wish to speak via Zoom. We are going to allow them that time now. So if Josiah Hayes, you'll unmute, keep your comments to about 3 minutes or less than 3 minutes. So thank you very much. Mr. Hayes. Please unmute.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to get to it. Yeah, first of all, I just want to say to all the victims in this case that, I'm deeply saddened by the events that taken place and what they had to go through. Nobody should have to go through that, and I hope that one day God brings them peace into their lives. I met Mr. Hunt about 35 years ago. We became to know each other, and when I realized that he had a troubled past, I knew that he told me. Um, I decided I saw that he had no place to go. He was basically living on the streets, and I thought maybe he could come stay with me. First thing my father told me was, "No, I don't want Scott nowhere near my house." Wouldn't tell me why. So if my friends aren't welcome, neither am I. So I talked to him about leaving town together, and he said, "Where we go?" I said, "We'll go stay with my mother in West Monroe, live with her, go to church with her and stuff, and get away from here." Well, that evening, I know it was mentioned in the last hearing about why Mr. Hunt couldn't go home. His stepfather didn't want him around the house. He wasn't wanted. Let me tell you a little bit about his stepfather, Keith. How I became to know Mr. Keith. Imagine you're standing at the fuel pumps, filling up your vehicle after you got off work, and some gentleman comes walking up to you with no shirt on, flip flops, beer in his hand, bushy hair, sweating, about 350 to 400 pounds, and approaches you without saying a word. And as he tilts his hand up and downs this beer, then proceeds to crush this beer can in his hand until it slices his hand wide open, blood draining down his arm. Then he proceeds to take and wipe that blood all over your face and all over your shirt. Then tells you the next time it'll be your blood, not mine, if you don't leave Scott alone. That's Scott's stepfather. That's what he had to endure and live with. That's why I wouldn't want to go back home if that's what I had to go home to. So that night, me and him both decided to take off and pack up and leave and went to West Monroe. We stayed with my mother, went to church with her. That's where me and him both met. Miss Wells was at church. And Scott and I worked 3 jobs together. We lived together. We were inseparable for the 2 years that we were together. Different situations caused us to split apart. I went back to South Louisiana. He showed back up a few months later. My dad told me when I first went to his apartment, "I don't want Scott around my apartment." Well, he showed up and I couldn't turn a friend away, so I snuck him in. Well, it wasn't until my dad's phone bill got run up to about $1,000 that he realized he was there and ran him out of town. Scott did have a troubled past, and he's been through a lot. But it was at that point, after my mother's phone bill got drove up also, all 3 of us, myself and my mother and father, were also victims by Mr. Hunt's actions. But he's been forgiven by us. We've talked about it. But also, it was at that point I had to make a decision: is family or friend? Because it was costing me the relationship between my mother and father I was about to lose. So I walked away from our friendship and dismissed him like a bad habit and went on. And for decades, we finally spoke again. And I realized at that point that Mr. Hunt has transformed his life. I've seen evidence of it. I've seen proof of it. I know time is crucial and we're limited to time here, so I can't really go into more detail. All I can tell you is he reads that Bible every day. He lives by that Bible. He has, accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior into his life. And I've seen a lot change about him. He used to cuss like a sailor. He don't cuss anymore. His attitude now is that he's comfortable where he's at. He understands whether or not he gets a yes today or he gets a no, he walks out of here with a smile on his face, happy, because God has already freed him. Okay.
We need to wrap up. We have several more people that we need to hear from. Okay. Thank you though for your comments. We also have Kelly Hunt, Mr. Hunt's sister, if you would like to speak. Kelly Hunt on. Okay. And unmute.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just want to say that I think that that my brother has changed a great amount since he's been incarcerated. When he went into jail, he had no real reason to want to live. And throughout the time that he's been incarcerated, he has been searching for the answers that he needed to move forward with his life. And he found those throughout, God. He has been wanting to be able to be released so that he can share his experiences and help other people. And he's wanting to be able to spend time with his family and his relatives and things of that nature. He has had a pretty bad childhood, so to speak, but I think most of that's probably on record in general. But he does have a home to go to, he does have a vehicle to drive, he does have a job, and things of that nature. And whatever the parole board would recommend him do, he would do any and all of it for his release, of course. But I think that he's done more than enough time for the crime that he has committed.
Okay.
That's about all I have to say about it.
We also have Susan Antley, a friend. If you will unmute and keep your comments to around under 3 minutes. Are you trying to connect now? Is that what I see? Okay. We can't hear you.
Hello. Thank you for letting me speak today on behalf of Scott. My title of this is Bright Side of Broken. I went for 30-something years not hearing from Scott, and I got approved to talk to him and to email him. And let me tell you, the first time I spoke to him, it was like a guiding light. The energy that I felt from him, and it's going all over me right now. I know my God saved him and brought him to the light. Right side of broken. He was broken and he did an awful thing. But we have forgiven him. We love him. I love him like my son, and I can't wait to the day that I can put my arms around him and love him and tell him how much I love him and forgive him. He's forgiven me and I've forgiven him. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he has changed his life 100%. Greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his friend. That would be me. I would do it today for his.
Thank you very much for your
from there. Thank you for letting me speak.
You're quite welcome. Okay, at this time, Warden Turner, do you have any comments that you would like to make?
Yes, ma'am. Real quick, he's done, like I said, what we've asked of him here. We got him in 2022. He's completed a lot of programming. He's currently one of our level 2 trustees, worked back with our maintenance shop. Had some disciplinary issues throughout his incarceration, but the last 3 years, seems like he's been right up free. He's currently enrolled in Victim Impact. He's a Pride member. And like I said, he's also one of our trustees here. So he does what we ask him to do.
Okay. We're going to go now to the victim's family. We have 4 people who have asked to speak. Our guidelines only allow for 3. We have Tom Holtzclaw, Gwen Rankin, Sharon Wells, and Casey Wells. So if the Gwen or Tom, if one of y'all will let the other speak on your behalf, that would be good.
Yes, that's fine. And my sister can certainly take that. I think we speak from the same heart. So when you hear from her, you're hearing from me. So that's fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So at this time, then, Gwen, if you want to make a statement.
Yes, ma'am. I'm very relieved to hear that Mr. Hunt has received the Lord as his Savior. And as we do read and study in his word, we find that there are certain consequences for our acts. As you stated at the beginning, his term was 60-something years, I believe. He has not fulfilled that by any means. This man entered the home of our mother and father on a Sunday evening when they were expecting to go back to church. They had had a number of incidents at their home where people were injured. Dad looked up and saw someone approaching the door that obviously had been hurt. He called out to my mother, "Honey, we've got to help somebody else." Their intentions were good. They were there to help. Mr. Hunt's intentions were not. He disrupted their lives for the remainder of the time that they were here with us. They had to change entirely. They had to strip their house entirely from the blood that was strewn everywhere, from the debris left behind. When we entered that house after a long standoff when the police had come into that, the stench of blood, the degree of turmoil was overwhelming. To our parents, they could not go back in that home. They had to come with me. They could not stay with Tom because he had a 2-story house. It was easier for them to have access. This affected them until the end of their lives. My mother's words to me were, "Gwen, don't let them let that man out." The blinds were never opened after that. The doors had repeated locks on them. And if a car drove by and honked too much or turned in the driveway, they were alarmed. This was a loving Christian family on their way to church with their life disrupted until the very end. I do not wish for him to return. I do pray that he will use his influence and that he will witness to those around him. Perhaps that is the Lord's plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to save Sharon for last. I'm going to ask if Casey Wells, the victim's son, would speak at this time.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Are you just audio or?
Yes.
Okay, great. Go ahead and make your statement, Casey.
Bear with me, please. But it's great to hear that he's found God. But that is for an afterlife. Here in the real world, we have real consequences for our actions. And it's funny hearing about a troubled past kind of being the excuse for these actions and things that have happened. Well, because of this person, I also had a troubled past, but I have yet to make a decision to be a felon, to be a crook, to be an abuser, to be a con. I refuse to do such. Want to live a good life. I don't want to do things like that. And being the con that he is, it's easy to do good in a place where you're forced to do good. But time has proven that with given free will, that this person puts people's lives in danger, and if freed, will continue to do so. I don't want to really take up any more of anybody's time, but you know, that's basically it. I just don't think this person be freed.
May I ask one question, Casey? Are you the biological son of Mr. Robert Hunt?
I am, unfortunately, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last victim we'll hear from will be Sharon Wells. Sharon. We can't hear you if
Okay. Yes, I'm here now.
you can
And
proceed.
okay, thank you. Like, I agree with everyone. The plea agreement it has not been met yet. It was charges were to be served consecutively for 60 years. And as part of that agreement, Hunt, he's a twice convicted felon, would not be he wasn't going to be sentenced as a habitual offender. And he agreed to this sentence as a plea bargain. Unfortunately, the laws have changed and he gets to come up for parole every 2 years. Yeah. In June of 2000, he was charged with aggravated rape, false imprisonment, second-degree battery, and parole violation. That's because he held me against my will in a hotel room. And then when he was released, he came after me again in September of 2000. He walked over 10 miles to my parents' house after throwing the protective order under a bridge with this duffel bag. Broke into my parents' house while I wasn't there, nor Casey. He hid up in the attic for 3 days until he waited for me to get home. And when I did get home and no one was in the house, he came in with my son with a knife, with on my 6-year-old son with a knife held to next to his throat, wanting to know where a shotgun was at. And he continued, I just was begging and pleading for him to leave Casey alone. Don't hurt him. He dragged me out of the house with a knife to my throat after he made me get my checkbook and my money and my keys. He threw me in the truck and was driving to the end of the road, which I knew where it was, had my head in his lap, and gets to the stop sign. All I know is I'm not going anywhere with him. He's not killing me outside this neighborhood. If I die, I'll die here. I threw it in park and threw the keys out the window, and there we started struggling. I was trying to get away and I got cut across the face. I had to have over 40 stitches. I got a cut across the shoulder. I had knife wounds on my hand. That's the reason all the blood was inside. And that was after he cut Mr. Hostcloth across the arm and told him if they didn't leave their home, he would kill them. And while inside that house, he made me crawl on all fours. It was over a 3-hour episode of wondering if I was going to come out of there alive or not. My parents had to leave their home. They moved from their home. And I also want to bring up the fact that I think on Scott's behalf, I was contacted in May of 2010 by a female and her son wanting to contact Casey to contact Scott. And then that was through Facebook. And then in March of 2023, Josiah Hayes contacted me through Facebook on behalf of Scott. So do I feel safe if he's released? No, I don't. I don't feel safe at all. I don't feel safe for those around me because I don't know if he will come back after me. And if he's had people contact me in March of 2023, May of 2010, then what's going to stop him from trying to get in touch with me once he's released?
Well, thank you for your comments today. We've heard a lot about you, Mr. Hunt, but we haven't heard from you. And at this time, and Ms. Wells, you have an opportunity to have the last word, so you can stay on. Mr. Hunt, how would you convince us that today you're prepared for parole and that we should give you that opportunity?
I'd like to take the moment that I have to address the victims through you, because this is something that I don't have the opportunity to do in any other fashion. And I realized not only the physical pain and harm that I caused, but I realized the emotional and the financial devastation that I caused in their lives. I realized that I went into the Holtzclaw's house and I not only physically accosted them, but I stole their sense of peace and security. I turned their house that was a sanctuary into a house of horrors. And they did. They met a monster that day. And I did the same thing with my direct victim, Miss Wells. And with my son, whom at one point in my life, I decided serving my own interests were more important than him, and I abandoned him as well. And I'm in prison deservedly. And I agree that the sentence was just and fair. And the only reason I'm before you today is because I met the man that they met on that day. But it took 20 years worth of this institutionalization on this charge for me to finally reach the end of myself, and it was horrible. My record is indicative of an individual who was searching for something, and I only say this in hindsight because I couldn't see it at the time. My record is full of write-ups, intoxications. I have a possession of a knife charge in there. Angola got pretty bad at the end, and I did have one for protection. I was damaged, and I don't use that as an excuse to hide behind it. I don't offer it as some opportunity to absolve or exonerate myself from my actions. I'm not only responsible for them, which that is what happened in the courtroom that day, but I am accountable for them. It reached a point in 2022 of January, and I'm not here seeking sympathy. I understand. I don't have any illusions that anything is owed to me here. I don't deserve the people that have spoken on my behalf, and I don't deserve to impose upon the Holtzclaws or upon the Wells of their time so that they may come here and they may have to reiterate it and restate their position again concerning me. But I met that person that they met on that day. I met him in 2022, and the intoxications were the end result of all of the self-help classes that you see interspersed in between them: Alcoholics Anonymous, Cage Your Rage, Votech. I was trying to find a balance, but there was always something missing, and I just reached the conclusion that I was beneficial to nobody. I was not even beneficial in the prison society. And I began trying to overdose so I was assured that I was going to hell. And so I was ready to get off, and I was ready to receive whatever came afterwards. And that's why most of my intoxications ended in the hospital. But then a change came over my life, and I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea what it was. But I have since learned that, yes, as the whole clause stated, God has a plan for my life, and I executed in here. It's my only desire was coming before this parole board to be released is because I understand the impact that I had on my victim's life. Everybody in this room and everybody on this screen are my victims, even those that are speaking on my behalf. It is because of me and because of the decisions and choices that I made that everybody has to meet here, the parole board, the state. Every time I receive a tray or receive some clothing, somebody else has to pay for it. I am still a drain upon society, and I can never change what I've done. And this paralyzed me for a while, living in the regret. And I had to find some way past that. And the only thing that I found that worked for me, that could heal me, was God. And I wasn't looking for him when he grabbed a hold of me. But he has transformed my life. And I do spread the message in here. I believe in law and order. I believe in the opportunity for everybody to be able to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. I don't believe anybody has the right to impose their will upon another human being, whether through physical, manipulative effects or psychological attempts. And this is what I stand on, and this is what I live in here, because I don't live the way that I live so that I may one day be able to go home. I live the way that I live because I have found out that it is right. All of my actions, all of my life is the fruit. I was trying to attack the drug usage that I was doing. The drug usage was actually the solution to what was wrong with me. I was broken. The roots were damaged. Now, like I said, I don't use that as an excuse for anything I did. I am accountable. And no matter how this hearing turns out, I'll leave out of here because my foundation is secure. I am stable. And I will leave out of here living the same way that I live today, because I didn't come in here so that I may try to sweep what happened under the rug, or we may try to attempt to pretend like it didn't happen, or that to diminish the gravity or the levity of what has occurred. I impacted people's lives. I have 2 children. I have 3 children sitting here that were not, 2 of them were not even direct victims of the crime. And I see the impact that I had on them. But I want to assure them that if it's not today, and I perceive that it may not be, and that's okay. I wanted to take the opportunity to apologize to them, and not just in words. I apologized to them when I received my sentence. Yes, sir? Okay. But I didn't understand what I was doing. I now apologize to them with remorse. I now apologize to them with the understanding of what I did. I now apologize to them with the assurance that I will go forward and I will attempt to sway and to persuade with the 40+ years of being institutionalized what I have learned. My only desire here today, if I am released, is so that I may care for my ailing parents, my aging parents. And so that I may be proactive instead of reactive. I may be able to reach some people that are about to cross that line before they create one victim.
Well, Mr.
And here
Hunt, you're very well spoken. You're very well spoken, and you appear very authentic, and I appreciate that. I would be asking my colleagues if they would like to ask any questions.
Well, I have no questions.
Mr. Byron,
I have no questions.
Mr. Hunt, I'm going to take lead on voting today. You have demonstrated and shown what rehabilitation is supposed to be, taking opportunities to take classes. But I do think that your epiphany, the moment that the light came on, has been too recent for me to grant today. And you said that you kind of felt like that, but you have done so many good things, and you're becoming the person that you need to be. And I want to commend you for that. But today, my vote is going to be to deny parole. But I would tell you, if you continue on the path that you're going, the future may be different for you. But today, my vote is to deny. Okay. Mr. Freeman.
I concur. You're doing great now, but I've got to see it a longer period than this. So my vote today, due to victim opposition and the heinous nature of your crime, and it has affected so many people, that my vote is to deny.
And Mr. Howard.
I'm going to concur with my colleagues for exactly the same reasons. We do believe that you have found the Lord, and it is a positive thing in your life. However, the crimes you committed were so serious and so heinous that it's still a debt to society. You still. So good luck with your future and continue on the path you're on.
I hope that you get a chance to take Thinking for a Change. I think that would be a helpful class for you.
I also had noted on mine, recommend victim awareness classes and Cage Your Rage. You hadn't done those yet either, which both would be beneficial for you before your next hearing.
Adequate time to prepare for your next hearing. So to the victims and family, we appreciate your attendance today. At this time, your request for reconsideration for parole has been denied.
And he's denied, but he'll be allowed to reapply in 2 years. Now, that's like a legislation thing, and we'll show a little bit of a news clip. You know, with the new governor, he is passing bills to update how parole works in Louisiana to be more victim, to be more survivor focused. And we'll watch that in a second. But let's now just talk about this hearing. And it's, first of all, for his supporters, when you have friends like that, you don't need enemies, right? That kind of line. It starts off with with the first friend. And I thought the beginning was good, and he should have ended it in the description of the stepfather as the 400-pound man, sweaty and crushing the can and the blood. And it's like, kind of painting this picture, and then he goes off on a tangent. But then, I brought him into my house, and he rang up our phone bill of $1,000, my father's house, so we were kicked out. And then he rang up my phone bill of my mother's house, and we were kicked out. But we met again, and 20 years later, and he's an amazing man. And then it's like, okay, um, right. And then and then the woman who's the friend, and she's like crying, like it's the turtles and the roses, and I will lay down my life for him. And it's like, what are you saying? It's like these unhinged supporters. We see it so often. It's like, what did that even mean? What? Meanwhile, he has all these write-ups, intoxications, and knives. He's only been write-up free for what, 3 years? He has one of his supporters contact the victim on Facebook just last year. I wish the parole board would have questioned him on that. We have seen the old parole board question. They would have gone, is that true? What happened? You got to stop this. And then the biggest mic drop of all comes from his own biological son when she asks, are you his biological son? He says, yes, unfortunately. And in his final statement, I have 2 children. 3 children. It's like, this guy is dangerous. It's so clear to everyone that he is dangerous. He checks those boxes. And again, the idea that people support him, it just blows my mind. It's like, well, I found God. I'm going to do the act of God, and I whatever happens, I don't care. It's like, really, why do you keep applying every 2 years? You're such a great guy. You hear just the when it wasn't 2 miles he walked 10 miles. He gets straight out of prison, throws away the restraining order, hides in their attic for 3 days. He doesn't have any. There's nowhere. It's the amount of rage that he has to have in him boiling up. It's clear. We don't have PhDs. We're just sheeple. We don't understand these things. He has a good time date of 2037. When you think about that, he will be getting out in what, I know I'm not good at math, in 13 years, and he's going to get to reapply every 2 years. And isn't it interesting that the ADA did not show up? It was great that she was there last time, but as time goes on, it's not as important, right? It's not as important. And he's 53 years old. He'll be in his 60s when he gets out, and that's young enough. That's young enough to just have that one moment where the rage kicks in. Who holds a knife to your own 6-year-old son's throat? And in the final, his final statement again, it's Miss Ledoux says, you're really well spoken. But he's not. When you actually listen to what he's saying, it's like his style of speaking. He speaks well, and he speaks, I guess, with confidence. But when you listen to what he's saying, there's nothing there. And it's, even brings up, he says, what do you say? I've learned through God that you can't have violence, whether it's physical or through manipulation. It's like you just had your buddy contact her on Facebook. Everything you're saying is manipulation. It's interesting. The parole board in these situations, they knew they were going to just deny. They didn't really ask questions. I love the old board. The old board, there's just something about them that they were like able to, it's just very intentional. And I mean, but you have Miss Jackson, you have Mr. Mirabella. These are people who are judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges. And they just love that process of it, of asking the questions, getting the answers, understanding the scenarios. It's different with the board we have now. And I really do miss the old board, but don't worry. We have a lot of cases coming up where we're connecting the dots like we do now. And thank you, Richard, for connecting those dots. So when we have a hearing that shows up in 2024, there's a spreadsheet Richard puts together and he says, here's the hearing man due, and here's the link to the hearing that took place 3 years ago. Here's all the resources. And again, a lot of you ask, who's Richard? Who's Richard? And I know I always bring him up. I've never met him in person. I've never spoken to him on the phone. We've been asking him to come on the show. Maybe he will one day, but he's a retired Navy man and successful businessman. And he just does this as a passion project. He doesn't make any money doing this. He does this as a way to because it's part of his goal to bring to the public all of the problems with the system. So thank him and his beautiful wife, Lorraine, for allowing him to invest all of his time doing this. Let's go watch this news article, this news reel of the new governor in Louisiana to see what he's passing to try to improve or maybe focus on the victims and survivors over just the perpetrators.
Governor Jeff Landry says Louisiana is a safer place with the bills passed during the crime special session.
Now, this morning, he held a signing ceremony for some of those new bills. Paul Murphy was there and has our report from the state capitol.
Gun rights supporters, crime victims, and law enforcement leaders packed Governor Jeff Landry's press room at the state capitol. The governor signed 11 of the 22 bills passed during the special legislative session focused on state criminal justice reforms.
These things are important to the economic viability of our state. And today we bring some justice to victims.
Among the bills Landry signed into law adds nitrogen gas and electrocution to the methods the state can carry out the death penalty. It will likely revive capital punishment in Louisiana, which has been on hold since 2010. Signed a series of bills by Kenner State Rep. Debbie Villio, he dubbed Truth in Sentencing. They do away with probation for most offenders, limit good time releases, and require inmates to serve at least 85% of the sentence they receive.
On that note about capital punishment and how they haven't had an execution since 2010, Utah also hadn't had an execution since 2010 and just had their first one. And we covered that request for a commutation from his last request to the board to say, please don't execute me out of Utah. We covered it on the second channel. I'll put the link to that in the description if you want to see that hearing. That was intense. So it is, of course, always important to look at the actual language of every bill and don't just buy into it, because we've seen plenty, rhetoric is rhetoric, but he is taking the different approach. He is taking the approach of survivors, victims first, and to serve 85% of the sentence and to limit those options. So we're going to see those changes, and there are a lot of changes that are happening in Louisiana around this. I do hope that, I think the problem that we see in the justice system is this pendulum that swings far in one direction and then far into the other direction without finding a median. And I think the 3-strike law is a perfect example of that. People were sick and tired of criminals getting out, like this guy who sexually assaults her, kidnaps her, and is out like 3 or 4 months later to do it again. Then they go to the other extreme and make the 3-strike law, which we then see people who are locked up with life sentences for breaking into cars, for possession of the devil's lettuce. Can we not just find the median? Can we not find fair sentencing? It's so difficult. It's like, the way I view it, it's like the airports after 9/11. Before there was no security. Then after 9/11, they're stripping your grandmother in the wheelchair and making her take her shoes off. And it's madness. It's like, I just hit a note on myself. Let's just find the median. Let's quit the rhetoric. Let's find things that work. I don't know. But I do think that awareness around this is the first small step to maybe the great thing about YouTube and these other publications is that I do think it can lead to some type of change because more of us are aware of what's going on. More of us are aware of the injustices. And when more of us are aware of it, then there's accountability for the decision makers, for the prosecutors, for the judges, for the parole board officers. And this is all leading in a good direction, in my opinion. Please do help the channel reach 100,000 subscribers. We're on our way, but can use your help. And with that, I'll let you go.